Ideas are produced by human minds, whether consciously or not. It is translated into beliefs and actions. Consequently, ideas and human action strongly interact. Hence, ideas begin with the people before they get into the community through actions. According to Heywood, an ideology is more or less a coherent set of ideas that direct or organize a specific political action. It consists of belief and value systems, a discussion of existing power relationships, an exploration of how political change is achieved in line with these power relations, and an illustration of a desired future. Political ideology concerns itself with how to allocate power and to what ends it should be used. It is an idea that guides behavior and directs social interactions. It provides structures in political realm to organize government and manage public affairs. Social institutions manifest the use of political beliefs. Before we are going to start the discussion on the major political ideologies, it is very important to present first the spectrum of political attitudes. Whether an individual is radical, liberal, moderate, conservative, or reactionary, he or she is largely represented by his or her political values and beliefs in political change. You must have heard before the terms leftist and rightist, and you must have wondered what they really mean in political discourse. Each of the political attitudes mentioned is positioned in a linear spectrum, either on the left, middle, or on the right. Thus, to be leftist means being supportive of the values on the left of the spectrum, while being rightist means espousing the value of those on the right. To be considered a leftist means supporting the causes of those on the left of the spectrum, where the radicals and the liberals are located. These groups advocate changes in the status quo. People on the left of the spectrum emphasize political liberty, social change, human equality, and human rights. The conservatives and the reactionaries, on the other hand, are located on the right side. The conservatives are the most supportive of the status quo, which lies between the conservatives and the reactionaries. The reactionaries, like the conservatives, are reluctant to progressive change. People on the right revere authority, tradition, elitism, and property rights. Therefore, the farther one is from the status quo, the more dissatisfied he or she is with it, and hence, more likely to be supportive of fundamental changes. The closer a person to the status quo, the less likely he or she is going to call for change. With these values and attitudes about change, the different major political ideologies can be positioned in the spectrum and be labeled as radical, liberal, moderate, conservative, and reactionary. Now, we are going to discuss the major political ideologies. Liberalism is a political ideology whose central theme is a commitment to the individual and to the construction of the society, in which individuals can satisfy their interests or achieve fulfillment. The core values of liberalism are individualism, rationalism, freedom, justice, and toleration. The liberal belief that human beings are first and foremost individuals endowed with reason implies that each individual should enjoy the maximum possible freedom consistent with a like freedom for all. However, although individuals are born equal in the sense that they are of equal moral worth and should enjoy formal equality and equal opportunities, liberals generally stress that they should be rewarded according to their differing levels of talent or willingness to work, and therefore favor the principle of meritocracy. A liberal society is characterized by diversity and pluralism, and it is organized politically around the twin values of consent and constitutionalism, combined to form the structures of liberal democracy. Conservatism as a political attitude is defined by the desire to conserve and is reflected in a resistance to change or at least suspicion of change. However, although the desire to resist change may be the recurrent theme within conservatism, what distinguishes conservatism as an ideology from rival political creeds is the distinctive way in which this position is upheld. The central themes of conservative ideology are tradition, human imperfection, organic society, authority, and property. For a conservative tradition reflects the accumulated wisdom of the past and the institutions and practices that have been tested by time. It should be preserved for the benefit of the living and for the generations yet to come. Conservatives view human nature pessimistically in at least three senses. First, human beings are limited, dependent, and security seeking creatures. Second, they are morally corrupt, tainted by selfishness, greed, and thirst for power. Third, human rationality is unable to cope up with the infinite complexity of the world. Hence, the conservative faith in pragmatism and their preference for describing their beliefs as an attitude of mind rather than an ideology. The belief that society should be viewed as an organic whole implies that institutions and values have arisen, although or through natural necessity, and should be preserved to safeguard the fragile fabric of society. Conservatives view authority as a basis for social cohesion, arguing that it gives people a sense of who they are and what is expected of them, and reflects the hierarchical nature of all social institutions. Conservatives value property because it gives people security and measure of independence from government. It also encourages them to respect the law and the property of others. Socialism is an ideology that is defined by its opposition to capitalism and its attempt to provide more humane and socially worthwhile alternative. The core of socialism is a vision of human beings as a social creatures united by their common humanity. As the poet John Donne put it, no man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. This highlights the degree to which individual identity is fashioned by social interaction and the membership of social groups and collective bodies. Socialists therefore prefer cooperation to competition and favor collectivism over individualism. The central and some would say defining value of socialism is equality. Socialism sometimes being portrayed as a form of egalitarianism. Socialists believe that a measure of social equality is essential guarantee of social stability and cohesion, and that it promotes freedom in the sense that it satisfies material needs and provides the basis for personal development. The socialist movement that has traditionally articulated the interest of the industrial working class seen as systematically oppressed or structurally disadvantaged within the capitalist system. The goal of socialism is thus or reduce or abolish class divisions. According to Investopedia, Marxism is a social, political, and economic philosophy named after Karl Marx, which examines the effect of capitalism on labor, productivity, and economic development, and argues for a worker revolution to overrun capitalism in favor of communism. Marxism posits the struggle between social classes, especially between the bourgeoisie or capitalist and the proletariat or workers, defines economic relations in a capitalist economy and will inevitably lead to revolutionary communism. The key tenets of Marxism are historical materialism, or the materialist conception of history, provides that the economy conditions all other aspects of social life, including the law, government, politics, education, and etc. The dialectic, a process of interaction between competing forces, drives change and lead to a higher stage of development. Historical change is therefore a consequence of contradictions in the mode of production as reflected in class conflict. The exploitation of proletariat by the capitalists who develop class consciousness among the former, hence ushering proletarian revolution, which will facilitate the creation of a communist society. Communist society is one that is classless and stateless, will arise when class antagonisms fade. Social democracy generally view society as equal to the sum of its parts. In other words, society is what people make of it. People are social beings, and society is where people achieve their fullest potential. Thus, the upper say of society are people who naturally come together in social settings. However, social democrats strongly reject an individualistic view of society, such as might be seen in both liberal and conservative ideologies. Social democrats stand for a balance between the market and the state, and between the individual and the community. This ideology promotes compromise between acceptance of capitalism and the distribution of wealth according to moral rather than market principles. Social democratic thought is concerned with the weak and the vulnerable and the underdog. Compassion, common humanity, freedom, equal opportunities, paternal duty, and care are among the values that social democracy recognizes. Fascism is a political ideology whose core theme is the idea of an organically unified national community, embodied in the belief in strength through unity. The individual, is a literal sense, is nothing. Individual identity must be entirely absorbed into the community or social group. The fascist ideal is that of the new man, a hero motivated by duty, honor, and self sacrifice, prepared to dedicate his life to the glory of his nation or race, and to give unquestioning obedience to a supreme leader in many aspects. Fascism constitutes a revolt against ideas and values that dominated Western political thought from the French Revolution onwards. In the words of the Italian fascist slogan in 1789, is dead. Values such as rationalism, progress, freedom, and equality were thus overturned in the name of struggle, leadership, power, heroism, and war. In this sense, fascism as an anti-character. It is defined largely by what it opposes. It is anti-rational, anti-liberal, anti-conservative, anti-capitalist, anti-bourgeois, anti-communist, and so on. Fascism represents the darker side of the Western political tradition, the central values of which it transformed rather than abandoned. For fascists, freedom means complete submission. Democracy is equated with dictatorship. Progress implies constant struggle and war, and creation is identified with destruction. Anarchism is an ideology that is defined by the central belief that political authority in all its forms, and especially in the form of the state, is both evil and unnecessary. Anarchists believe that the state is evil because, as a repository of sovereign, compulsory, and coercive authority, it is an offense against the principles of freedom and equality. The core value of anarchism being unrestricted personal autonomy, the state and the accompanying institutions of government and the law are therefore rejected as corrupt and corrupting. However, the belief that the state is unnecessary is no less important to anarchism. Anarchists reject political order but have considerable faith in the natural order and spontaneous social harmony, ultimately underpinned by optimistic assumptions about human nature. Government, in the other words, is not the solution to the problem of order, but its cause. Nevertheless, the anarchist preference for a stateless society in which free individuals manage their own affairs through voluntary agreement and cooperation has been developed on the basis of two rival traditions: socialist communitarianism and liberal individualism. Anarchism can thus be taught as a point of intersection between socialism and liberalism, a form of both ultra-socialism and ultra-liberalism. Feminism is a political movement and ideology that aims to advance the social role of women. Feminists have highlighted that they see as the political relationship between the sexes, the supremacy of men and the subjection of women in most, if not all, societies. Feminist ideology is therefore characterized by two bases: beliefs. First, women and men are treated differently because of their sex. And second, that unequal treatment can and should be overturned. Although most feminists therefore embraces the goal of gender equality, it is misleading to define feminism in terms of this goal, as some feminists distinguish between liberation and equality, arguing that the latter implies that women should be like men. The central concept in feminist analysis is patriarchy, which draws attention to the totality of oppression and exploitation to which women are subject. This, in turn, highlights the political importance of gender, understood to refer to socially imposed rather than biological differences between women and men. Most feminists view gender as a political construct, usually based upon stereotypes of feminine and masculine behavior and social rules. Ecologism, or green politics, has been viewed as an ideology in its own right only since the 1970s, when green political thought started to go beyond an essentially pressure group like concerns for the environment, commonly called environmentalism. The central theme of ecologism is the belief that nature is an interconnected whole, embracing humans and non-humans, as well as the inanimate world. This has encouraged ecologists to question the post-centric or human-centered thinking that characterized all other political ideologies. The key idea of green political thought is the notion ecology, which is stressing the network of relationships that sustain all forms of life, dictates a holistic or systems-based approach theorizing. Other influential ideas include sustainability, which implies significant restrictions on economic growth based on the entitlements of future generations. Environmental ethics, which either extend conventional moral thinking by applying it to non-human species or rejects conventional thinking altogether by emphasizing the intrinsic value of nature in post-material model of human well-being, which emphasizes self-actualization rather than material consumption. Cosmopolitanism is an ideological expression of globalization. It is a belief in a cosmopolis or a world state. It is thus associated with a project of world government. Modern cosmopolitanism tends to have a moral or a cultural character, believing that the world constitutes a single moral community. Cosmopolitanism focuses on the idea that all the people in the world have obligations to one another, regardless of nationality, ethnicity, and the like. Ideas shape human actions and social outcomes. What is believed by the members of the community has been drastically affecting their social, political, and economic conditions, and also their way of life. Liberalism has influenced human choice, decisions in the market, and satisfaction of desires. Socialism has been forerunner of values such as equity, justice, and community life. Democracy is not just a political system, but an ideology that pushes freedom, equality, rights, and welfare of the people, protected by the government. In these forms of instances, ideologies are made alive when individuals and communities are influenced by ideas.